Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. Vita Vygovska is joining us today to talk about building businesses that are sustainable, profitable, and scalable. She's an award-winning author, speaker, and window treatment specialist. Her company, Vitalia Inc., Fine Window Treatments and Interiors, is an all-encompassing fabrication, measurement, installation, and project management service exclusively for interior designers and architects. In business for over 13 years, Vita and her team are proud to be experts in their narrow field, providing their clients with superb quality product and excellent communication. Most importantly, her team takes off the stress, saves time, and provides peace of mind in the job, making sure that it is well done. Our discussion today is one that I believe we could have over and over as our businesses change and morph. Vita is so open and said to me prior to the interview today, ask me anything. You know, it's not always common that I get that as a comment prior to going live on the air. And so I knew that bringing her on, we could have a really rich discussion about anything having to do with business, and it would be an awesome podcast. And I think this one is. We go from topic to topic and move around and then tie it all back together at the end. So what I want you to do is sit back and really enjoy her take on what it means to create a business that serves you the way you need it to, not one that you serve. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hi, Vita. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. This is a real honor.
Well, it's my pleasure to talk to you. You and I met, years ago. I remember you were hosting a panel. I think it was about pricing and something. And
yes, it's pricing. I think pricing strategies for interior designers. That was,
it was a long time ago.
That was a long time ago.
Yes. Yeah, it was really a long time ago. And I remember thinking at that point, okay, she's sharp. I like her.
Thank you.
And then we run into each other over the years, back and forth in a lot of different places, especially some of the conferences and things. And so when I saw you at IWCE earlier this year, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to reciprocate now. You have to come on and let's talk about all the fun things that you're doing and all the wonderful things that are happening in your business. So thank you for being willing to say yes. Because at the time we didn't even have our topic, but I was like, she's so smart. We could pick out any topic in business and talk about it.
Oh my goodness, you're so nice, Michelle. Thank you very much. And you know what, likewise, I have attended so many of your seminars, be that at IWCE or the Workroom Conference or WCAA, and it's always a pleasure, and I always walk away with something new that I either haven't heard or haven't heard just right for that moment. So.
Yeah, I think that's an important distinction. I love that you made it. Sometimes we've heard things, but it wasn't at the moment that we could either act on it or that it would go to the heart of the matter. And so sometimes, you know, we have heard things 10, 12 times before it means something to us in that moment. So very, very good point to make.
Yeah, happens to me all the time. That's why oftentimes I go back to the same speakers and the same topic of the presentation over and over again, knowing that for where I am in life and where I am in my business, where I am just mentally, spiritually, psychologically, whichever way, I will hear things, the same sentence, the same words, and everything the same, but I will hear it in the way that I need to hear it at that moment.
There was an exercise. I don't have the sentence in front of me, but it was a sentence, and they read it like 5 different ways, and every time they emphasized a different word in the sentence, and based on which word was emphasized, the sentence completely changed meaning.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and I should go back and try to find the sentence that was. But it was one of those things that it made you go, wow. You know, the way that we can use words and phraseology to get a point across, we could be saying the same things, emphasize different words just slightly, just the intonation of the word, and it can have a completely different impact on somebody based on that.
So true, so true.
So Vita, let's start off by you telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and your business and how you got started.
Sure, sure. So my business is called Vitalia Inc., Fine Window Treatments and Interiors. And essentially, we are in business of making the jobs of our interior designers easier and less stressful. And so we exclusively service interior designers and architects, and we service them by providing all-inclusive fabrication, measurement, installation, and project management services for window treatments and related products like upholstery and bedding and things like that. Essentially, we try to position ourselves and have our designers think of us as an extension of their own team. And so our focus is soft and hard furnishings, like I was saying, window treatments, bedding, upholstery, blinds, shades and shutters, motorization. However, our real focus is making sure that our designers are confident in the work well done. And so we understand that their scope of work covers floor to ceiling and everything in between. And I couldn't possibly understand how interior designers know so much and retain so much and can manage so much information as well as client relationships. And so if I can take off of their plate just one little part of their entire scope and put it onto my plate, and they can feel confident and comfortable with my company doing that for them, then I feel like my job was well done. We've been in business for about 13 years, and really proud, to be honest, really proud to be experts in our narrow field, providing our designers with two main things, I would say. We are really good at high quality product, and we're really good at high quality communication. And that's what they get from us from the very beginning and throughout the entire project.
When you started your business, did you start it with the idea that you were going to specialize in window treatments only and work only with designers? Or did you start off with a couple of other models and then come to that one over the years?
Yeah, so I definitely started as a window treatment expert only. I didn't really have any kind of design aspirations or decorating aspirations. It was strictly window treatments. And 13 years ago, it was a mix of both designers and customers. So, like, I think it's sometimes referred to as wholesale and retail. And so I may have started with like 25% designers and 75% consumers. And over the years, it inched over to about 75% designers and 25% consumers. And about 3 to 4 years ago, Michelle, I've made a really conscious choice. And I drew a line in the sand, so to speak, and I said, I will not do any more consumer business. And I've literally turned it away. I've referred them to other people that I know who are still doing that or who want to pursue that side. But I decided to focus on the interior designers only.
What does that relationship look like when you choose to work together? Because I know some designers are I guess maybe their only opportunity to work with window treatment specialists would be the workroom person who's doing the work, or they go out and do all the work and hand it off. But yours is different. You come in a much more collaborative way.
Right.
Right? Explain kind of like the dynamic that you have going on, because I do think that I have other clients with very similar dynamics, but it's not, I would say, what most designers are used to in that relationship.
Okay, sure. Yes, thank you for making that distinction, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify and to dive into it even a little bit more. So our my model is not just the workroom model. It's not that the designer comes to me with all the exact measurements and give me the exact design and I just fabricate it. I mean, we can, but that's not where we shine, so to speak. What my model is based on is to be collaborators from start to the very finish. And for me to provide a one-stop shop to my interior designers. So they come to me and say, I have this house, I want you to do the window treatments. And we may meet there first, or I may provide them with some sort of top line estimate, but eventually we meet there and we talk about the specifics of the style and the treatment that they have in mind. And that meeting and the whole process is very collaborative in that I may say, I know you're thinking that this width or this length would work, but in looking at the dimensions of the room and the dimensions of the window, I may see the proportions a little bit differently. So let's think of slightly a different angle on this. And another example may be, they may show me a fabric that they're thinking for a drapery panel. And I may say, this is such a gorgeous fabric, it's really great. But you know what? I know how you like your drapes, and this fabric is not going to lay the way you like it. So maybe we should think about choosing something else. So, and these types of discussions happen all the time. And designers specifically look to me and to Vitalia Inc. to provide them with that sort of feedback, because they have a good idea of what they want, and they have a good idea of what it will look like in the end, but they can't possibly know every single nitty-gritty intricacy and detail of how a fabric will lay, of how a lining will behave, of how a certain pleat will look, how what a return needs to be, what an overlap needs to be, and I'm just referring to drapes, and there's a million other details. So that's where we come in and really help them on a very collaborative way. So, and then throughout the whole process, we try to stay very much in communication with them, letting them know exactly where their project is at every step of the fabrication or expediting of that order. And then at the end, we install and take care of the whole thing. So essentially, it truly is a one-stop shop where they just delegate off their part to us, and we make them the heroes. And so it's very important to me to be of value to my designers, and that value I provide by giving them information, giving them proper knowledge, saving them time, saving them energy, and making them heroes to their clients at the very end.
I love that. I need a person like that just in my own life, right? That I can like give ideas.
I know. I need a Vita for my Vita too.
I need a Vita, yes. That I can just like, here's my idea. Go, like, go make that happen, please. You know, yeah, sure, that sounds great. Put your ideas in it. Go. I love it. Expedite that. Oh my gosh, I need you in my life. But listen, you know, I come from a background of window treatments, and I started my window treatment company in 2000. And so I've been in this part of the industry. This is my 20th year now. And
oh, wow.
I know, right? It's a long time. I was on a podcast earlier today, and she asked me where I got started, and I literally said, well, going back 30 years. And I was like, oh my goodness. That's like some people listening their whole age, like, let's go back to the day you were born. But you know, it is what it is.
It is. That's right. Yep. And you're that much wiser and that much more beautiful, Michelle, because I know you in person.
I'm just going to hold on to that, so much wiser. But I'll say this, getting started in window treatments, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I'm telling you, I've been in it for 20 years. And if I were still in it in the day-to-day grind of it, I would still be learning things that blow my mind every day. Just like you said, you barely scratched the surface, and you said that, and I agree. But I think that's one of the biggest things that keep designers from really making money at the windows is they don't know all those details, because there's so many details to know. I mean, like you said, how could one person know all of it? You could, but how many years would it take you to get there? And this kind of just shortens that gap. I remember being at one of the conferences and manning the WCAA, the Window Covering Association booth, which we're members of. And this young college girl came by, and she was with one of the, I think she was with SCAD. I mean, she was with one of the art and design schools. And we were talking to the young students about window coverings and why they needed to connect with somebody who could help them with window coverings and the importance of that in the interior design industry. This young girl looked at me and she's like, I said, are you doing residential or commercial? And she's like, residential. And I said, so what do you know about window treatments? And she's like, oh, I'm not going to be designing them. I said, oh.
She flat out said that. That's crazy.
She flat out said it. She said, I'm not going to be doing window treatments. And I looked at her with a straight face. I said, oh, wow, you're only working with clients who live in underground caves? That must be interesting. And she looked at me with a blank face, and I was like, sweet girl, they don't sell houses without windows. What are you doing? What are you doing? You know, at least for privacy. I mean, there's so many layers and so many things about window treatments. But I was shocked that there were these young, you know, design students walking out of school telling us, oh, I'm not touching the window. I'm not touching the window. And I kept going, come to the window, come to the window. You can make money at the window.
That's crazy. You know, it just sounds like a lot of design students must be graduating from school with, you know, aspirations of being this wonderful and amazing designer and using their creativity. And that's wonderful. That's amazing. That's a skill and talent that I personally don't really possess. But what they also, and all of us also need to realize, is that we're in business to make money too. I mean, here's our podcast, right? Profit as a choice. We're in here to make money and to make a profit. And my gosh, window treatments are it. This is where, in addition to a lot of other aspects that interior designers do for the home, window treatments is definitely a profit center. And to make such bold statement and this choice, I would suppose, out of fear or out of lack of knowledge, to not pursue that profit center at all. I mean, to me, that's just, I don't know, not great.
Short-sighted. It's short-sighted. Yeah. I would bet that if I were to find that young designer today, you know, who would be probably in her 30s by now, my guess is she's dabbled at the window. I've got a suspicion that she's done something at the window. So
I hope, you know, another reason why I find interior designers not wanting to go to the window is because they have tried it before. They essentially didn't know what they didn't know. Thought they were going to wing it somehow, and they've made mistakes.
Right.
And you and I both know that a single mistake can cost you thousands of dollars.
Yes.
And there goes your profit margin, and there goes that profit center. So window treatments can be both. They can be incredibly profitable or incredibly costly. And so in addition to them often not studying it in school and not knowing enough about the window treatments, there's also that aspect of fear of making a mistake and losing money.
Right. Absolutely. And I'll just give a plug here for the WCAA, the Window Covering Association of America, because, you know, the people that have joined that, designers and workrooms, are there because they have a love of things at the window, right? They want to make money, they want to be educated, and they want to have good business practices. And at WCAA.org, you can go out and find people who, you know, who really understand the business of windows. So if you're looking for someone to help you with window treatments, you know, that's local to you, that's a great place to start. So Vita, let me ask you this. When you first started your business 13 years ago with window coverings, did you go into it immediately with a full business plan and an exact understanding of the profitability that you wanted to have, or did you come at it a little more creatively?
Michelle, you've known me for 10 years. What do you think?
I think you probably came in with a business plan.
Are you kidding? I had spreadsheets upon spreadsheets. My spreadsheets had spreadsheets.
Yeah.
I went into it with so much thought and so much planning that looking back at it, it hurts my brain a little bit.
Yeah. You know, sometimes, and let's be fair, I would say 85%, if not 90%, of my guests have said that they went into their business without a full plan. Not to
wow.
say they didn't have an idea to make money, but they were chasing their passion and their creativity. 85% easy. The other 15%, and when I went into this 20 years ago, I didn't go in with the idea of, I did not have a business plan. My business started because somebody rang my doorbell. But I can tell you when I went in as an investor at CHF Academy, I went in with a business plan. And I can tell you when I started my coaching and consulting company in 2013, I went in with a business plan. So I did it one time without, and I was like, not ever again.
Not ever again. No, thank you.
Not ever again. The learning curve on that was way too long for me. But I also know some people that overanalyze, right? So they have analysis paralysis and they can never pull the trigger and just move. So they almost go to the other extreme. They analyze, and then they analyze their analysis, and then they continue to analyze that. And so they never actually move and start the business, or the business starts so slowly because they're being overly methodical. Like there's no risk taking at all.
Right. That's interesting. You know, when I went into it, so I'm not sure if you know this about, you probably do, I'm sure you do. So I was in corporate America for about 10 years before I started my business. My last job was the director of marketing for Lennox China. And for it, I managed a $10 to $12 million business. It's been 13 years, so I can't exactly remember, but we'll call it $10 million business. So when I decided to essentially quit my job, which is what I did, I knew that I had to replicate the type of lifestyle that I had and the type of living that I made. And, you know, I mean, with all the bad stuff said about corporate and all the negative stuff, why ultimately I decided to leave, but you know, there were some good things too, right? I mean, I had like a 6-figure 10+K salary, and I traveled the country, and expense accounts and window office, and you know, you make presentations to the board of directors and report to CEO and all of that. So when you're at that sort of level, and all of a sudden, well, except there wasn't all of a sudden for me, but when you decide to quit, when you decide to leave that kind of life and lifestyle and everything that comes with it, I had to go into my new venture with my eyes wide open.
Right.
So, I had a sales plan, I had a marketing plan. I knew exactly what I was going to do.
So I'm curious, for that particular one, what made you go into window treatments from Lennox China to window treatments? What?
I know, right?
And
like,
I'm asking you because in just a second, we're going to talk about scaling your business again. So I'm just curious as to how you made that particular decision.
Yeah. So I started exploring all sorts of different ideas, just like any kind of idea that would come to my mind, whether it was, I think at that point it was in 2000, what is it? We're 19 minus 13. Oh, 2006. So about 2 years prior to that. So starting about 2004. So I started just looking at various ideas. And at that point, like friendship bracelets were big, I think. So I thought, oh, maybe I'll start a friendship bracelet business. I mean, I looked at every single thing that, you know, moved and had any kind of breath. And
you definitely wanted out of corporate. If
I
you were looking at friendship bracelet.
Yes, out of corporate. And then I realized that I didn't quite have it in me to just go out and do it on my own idea. Like I guess I wasn't creative enough to come up with another version of a friendship bracelet or something, you know, for it to fly and be sustainable. So I started looking at various franchise models, Michelle, and I looked at, I mean, so many different things. I think I looked at like vitamin stores, and I at one point I was very much, and still am, in fitness. So I looked into opening my own fitness studio. And I think at one point I even flew out to Texas, I think, to meet with an owner of a used cardboard box company. because they were featured in Entrepreneur magazine and they were talking about scaling up and maybe franchising. So I flew out there to meet with that whole team and see if that would be a fit for me. So I looked at so many different directions with the idea that I wanted to have a sustainable, profitable business. It wasn't necessarily that I wanted to be creative or that I wanted to do window treatment, or that I wanted to do one thing or the other. It was just that I've always been a business person my entire life. That's what my background was. In college, I'm in partially a fashion merchandising major, but primarily a marketing business major. And then throughout my life corporate as a buyer and as a marketing professional with Lennox was all about business, was all about financials. It was all about how do you grow a business and scale it up and add resources and add various marketing components and add SKUs and make presentations to the sales, all of that kind of stuff. So it was just all about finding the right business model that would bring me the type of lifestyle that I wanted. And so through that whole research, I found a franchise that was called V2K Window Decor and More.
I remember that.
Oh, yeah. So I flew out to Colorado, and all of this like on my time, right? So, I mean, I'm still part of corporate and I'm still doing everything that I'm doing. And I either took personal days or went on weekends or vacations, whatever it was. So I remember flying out to Colorado, meeting with their president, and ultimately signing on the bottom line and giving them a big check too, because that's what you do when you buy a franchise. And so I have to give them a lot of credit because they did a 2-week training with all of us. It started in 2006 in January. And that's where I got certified as the window coverings professional. And they taught me a lot that I needed to know to get started in terms of window treatments and how to measure a window and what is an IB, what is an OB, what is a return, what's an overlap, what's fullness, what's width of materials, what's a hem, what's a, all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
So they taught me a lot of that. And I stayed with them for, I think, maybe a year or 2 years. But very quickly, I realized that I wanted something beyond that I could, now that I've gotten my footing, they gave me foundation, they gave me my footing, and I was ready to kind of spread my wings and go beyond them. So I exited out of the system and I started Vitalia Inc.
And so if I could pick up on the 2 words that kind of stood out to me in that explanation, is you wanted a business that was sustainable and profitable.
Yeah, that's correct.
How do you define sustainability in a business?
Sustainable to me means that I can count on the revenue and therefore profits coming in day after day, month after month. It's not something where I have a business that has one-hit wonder, the friendship bracelets, to go back to that, right? And that's it. And everybody has it. Everybody's tired of it. And then they go to some other bracelet or whatever.
Right. Or pet rocks or whatever.
Right. Exactly. So that's what sustainable means to me.
Okay. And so let me ask this too, because again, having been in this industry like you for a very long time now,
sure,
we know that design, window treatments, staging, all of that can be very cyclical if we're watching the industry at large. And so what kind of things have you done and put into play in your own business so that it could be sustainable with that definition, so that you don't have the high highs and the low lows, or we have all this business in January and we have, which, rarely happens, that's the highest month that we have. But let's say that you have a lot of business in January and you don't have business again until July. I mean, that's uncomfortable. That's not overly sustainable. I mean, you could make it sustainable by saving all the money, but it's uncomfortable. Most people get uncomfortable with those types of highs and lows. Have you done anything in particular outside of just build the heck out of a marketing funnel? Your the people that are feeding you work. What have you done to create the sustainability part? Because I think that's one of the hardest pieces. When you've been in business long enough, like let's talk like a Beth Hodges. She's been in business 30 years or something. but so she's doing people's third and fourth homes, like, and she's doing their children and their grandchildren's homes because she's got this large, client list that just keeps returning. That is one version of sustainability, but there are others. So for people just starting out, what is it that you've done? And is there anything that they can do at the beginning to create some sustainability in their company?
Mm-hmm. Right. I understand what you're asking. And it's a really good question. There's definitely a cyclicality in this business. But we also have to understand and recognize and accept that there is probably cyclicality in any business.
Yes.
Maybe short of bread and milk, any business has high seasons and low seasons. And it took me some time to accept those seasons, Michelle, because I remember when some months were super busy and I was just going crazy, and then all of a sudden there would be nothing. I mean, I definitely remember that. It's not that I was born out of the V2K program and became this wonderful, everyday busy kind of a window treatment person.
Sure.
Definitely not. There were definitely highs and lows. And I did go through times with such angst and such worry about why is business not coming? Why do I not have enough? What's happening? What's going on? And I do have to say that it's only with experience, with years behind you, that you start to accept that cyclicality happens. And you know what? After a little while, Michelle, you kind of start to embrace it and like it.
Yeah, it becomes the slower time, or the time that we do other things that we can.
So many other things. And I have to say, I almost keep a list of things for that slower time, those other things, things that you will never have time to do during your busy times, right? Like sort your photos. My gosh, who has time to sort and name the photos in the busiest of seasons when you have bazillion customers to service?
Right, creating new. A lot of people use that time to, to create their new samples and things like that they want to showcase.
Sure. Even organize all of your samples. Decide what's in, decide what's out. Work on my policies and procedures and try to refine those. Read books, get more educated, go to conferences or classes, or whatever it may be. Sometimes even go to more networking events just to be in contact with your colleagues and say hello and know that you're not alone. So I think my first piece of advice is for somebody who's been in it for a few years, who knows that it's there, I would say embrace it and keep a running list of things that you can do during those slower times. For those designers that are brand new and haven't experienced the highs and lows, I'm going to say brace yourself.
Yeah.
That it will be there. No matter what you do, no matter what an awesome marketing machine you are, it will happen. And just know that it will come. And when it comes, know that there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with the business. There's nothing wrong with the industry. There's nothing wrong with what you're doing. It's just the nature of the beast. And kind of relax into it and try to be okay with it.
That's really great advice. And I do think we have to make peace with all of that, because without that, all we're doing is creating more angst on top of the angst that we already have. And that is not going to be conducive to us, working with intention in those slower times. I've also found that, I laugh at this kind of in that ironic way. I'll have a client who comes to me and they're like, I'm so slow. And we'll work through some things. And of course, seasons change. And all of a sudden they are like bombarded with work. And then they call me and go, I can't breathe. I wish it would slow down a little. And then it slows down and they go, oh my gosh, I have no clients. And it's like, and it's not always really feast or famine, but it's this, there is a hurry up and wait to some degree.
Definitely.
With the industry that we have, it's just, it's like waves. It is not a still lake. That's not what we work in. And you've got to learn to ride the wave a little bit. But the great thing is I think both of us mentioned, having been in business for a while, you almost can anticipate when the wave's coming. You can start to, I'm not saying we don't sometimes get wiped out and knocked down, because it happens. But I would say by and large, like I've got so much historical data. I know what's getting ready to happen to me in July. You want to know what's going to happen? I'm going to be booked solid with clients, and I'm probably going to have 3 or 4 call and tell me that they are just on vacation and they just can't get their brain in gear, and that they're going to ask me if they can pause. It happens every year in July. And every year I giggle and I laugh and I'm like, I'm getting ready to fill out my schedule, and some portion of them are not going to show up because they're going to give themselves a chance to rest. And so I just know. And, you know, and now I don't think it's anything about me. I think it's summer. It's hot. They're done.
Right. I do have to say that even though it's really important to give ourselves a break and permission to not get so stressed out about these things, I don't think we should give ourselves ever permission to let go of marketing.
Agreed.
I think it is one thing that we must do all the time. If we're busy, we must find time. If we're not busy, we have nothing else to do. We have time. And everywhere in between those two extremes, you have to have a marketing plan, marketing activities, and you have to execute them all the time so that you can have a more or less fuller pipeline, or know if there is a downturn a bit because of the summer or whatever,
that it's coming back.
That you have, the only thing you can control, Michelle, and of course you know that, is what you do, right? You can't control people's summer schedules. You can't control anything else other than what you do. And so in that context, then, if you can control your marketing activities and everything that you put out there for your target client within your brand, within your value and mission purpose for your business, then that is what you're obligated and you must do on an every day, every week, every month basis. And that way, at the end, when something is off, you will know that you have done everything that was in your power, and the rest is up to the universe.
That's excellent advice, simply because I see that sometimes when we get super busy, we quit marketing. And then when we quit marketing, we wonder why it got dead. Like, why did it go dead and nobody's calling? So then we start our marketing machine back up, and 3 to 6 months later, it picks back up. We get busy, we quit marketing, it happens again. And so I love that conversation, and I have it quite often. If we will have continuous marketing, then we will always know that that wasn't the problem. We may have some other issue. Maybe we need to change messaging, but it wasn't for lack of marketing.
I think another piece of advice that I can give to, another thought, not advice, to that topic is, we have to manage our financials. And we, in the context of financials, most often talk about our P&Ls. We very rarely talk about balance sheets, and we rarely talk about cash flows. But we as business owners must manage our own cash flow. And you and I both know that our cash flow is a lot different than our P&L statement. And so if we can tuck away and save and put aside what needs to be put aside for those slower times, then that's what we have to do. And looking at our expenditures and looking at cash flow outlays during the busy times and the slower times, that's what we have to forecast for the rest of the quarter, the rest of the half a year and a year, so that we can have a sustainable business during those slower times.
Very true. It's interesting. I have clients that come to me all the time, and like you mentioned, we focus on the P&L first. And I do usually start with, I look at the balance sheet first, but I usually start with them with the P&L, because they can understand that. You know what I mean? We kind of can understand income.
Because it's your checkbook.
It is. It's like the checkbook. And then most people, they just kind of glance over the balance sheet. And even this week, I pulled one up and I said, oh, wow, it looks like you've already had an owner's draw of more than you've even made this year. That's interesting.
Oh, that's interesting. How does that work?
I was like, no, I haven't. And then I went, then we need to go talk to your accountant or your bookkeeper. And then I said, oh, and it looks like you owe like $60,000 to these 3 county governments for sales tax. No, I don't.
Oh my God.
And then I'm like, then we need to go talk to your accountant or your bookkeeper. And it's just because they're not looking at the balance sheet. And sometimes, sadly, I'm seeing bookkeepers that don't adjust entries for the balance sheet. So they're so focused on that P&L, that income statement, that the balance sheet is a super hot mess. I have another client this week that I said to her, she has a company that was doing her books. And I said to her that these are wrong. I can look at them and tell you they're wrong. I can ask you those 3 questions and know that they're wrong. So she went back to the company and said, you need to, my coach says you have to clean up my financials. And so she comes back and she's like, okay, they said they cleaned them up. I'm like, it still says you owe this money. Do you owe this money? She's like, I don't even have that credit card anymore. Like,
oh, dear Lord.
You need to go back to them. Again, they don't know what they're doing. If they've had a chance to clean it. And so I say that simply because it's not enough, again, to take and say, I got a copy of my balance sheet. Check, I looked at it. We have to stop and look at that document. We've got to understand it. And I created the course, Understanding Your Financials, which goes into explaining the balance sheet, cash flow, the P&L, a financial plan, how to set financial goals, and then what are the metrics, and then where does all that show up on your tax documents? Because if we don't manage all of that, there will be no sustainability, right? Then you add the whole profit first methodology on top of understanding your financials, and we're able to move money where we need to move it, exactly as you mentioned, almost like that saving for the second half of the year because I know this big bill's coming kind of thing. You don't wait to the day of and show up with all your tax money for a whole year.
I have to say, Michelle, you're such a tremendous resource for the design industry. I mean, not a whole lot of people really understand financials, number one. Number two, can explain it to people who don't understand, weren't taught, never had to deal with it, for all the right reasons, they're not there. And then teach them how to do it and encourage them and empower them to do it. You're an amazing and tremendous resource. And I just have to say that anyone who has any kind of doubts about their financials, I think you are the it girl.
Oh, thank you. The same way that you say that you want to show up for the designers that you are working alongside and serving them so that they look fantastic, right? You want them to be the rock star on site.
Yeah.
That's the way that I feel about interior designers and workrooms and stagers and those people that I help. I'm not coming up to be their savior. I am the one stepping alongside them and saying, let me guide you to understand your business and what you've created. And I love how you even recognize, I want to empower them. I want them to be the rock star in their business.
Because ultimately it's their responsibility. The buck stops with us, the business owners, but it's also up to us to recognize where we need help.
Right.
I mean, I've always worked with a coach. There have been very few years in my business life that I didn't have a coach, and mostly because I was either pregnant or giving birth or breastfeeding or pumping or something, one of those two.
Right.
Anytime I was able to step back into the business, I've had a coach who would see my blind spot, who would encourage me to get over my lack of knowledge, if it was a true blind spot, or fear of something, and give me the resources to get over that, and then encourage and empower me to do this. And that's what I see you doing for interior designers in terms of many, many other things, but just because we're talking about financials now, definitely in context of financials as well. And I just think it's really important.
Yeah, and I've heard before, I have my own coach for just that same reason, because we all have blind spots. I was just talking to another business owner a few minutes ago, and I had heard the other day, you can't solve the problem from inside the business sometimes. You've got to either step outside of it or have somebody look from outside.
Definitely. I mean, you cannot diagnose your own problem. We know that doctors are the worst patients. It's just, to me, it's clear as anything that in order to move forward, up, down, sideways, and anywhere, to move anywhere, if you feel like you're stuck somewhere, is to have an outsider's eye on your problem and then helping you through it.
And so with all of that said, so we talked about sustainable businesses and profitable businesses. I want to move it a little bit to the left and the right and the top and the bottom. And let's talk about scaling the business, because you have shared, you shared, I think, on Seal's podcast, her So Much More podcast. If you haven't listened to that one, for all the workrooms out there.
Wonderful.
Really great podcast with Seal DeGuglielmo. And I think it was one of the ones that was hosted by Janelle Deck with Adaptive and the Workroom Channel. And you were so great to come on a couple different times and talk about some of the tension, I think is what I like to call it. And you may have another word for it, frustration, irritation. I'm trying to go to tension. But the tension, the tension of thinking, I want to scale, and what might that look like? And I love how you even said it could be scaling up, it could be scaling back, it could be scaling to the left. I had a client the other day who told me that somebody mentioned her that she wasn't scaling her business, and she was scaling her business to only go up maybe $200,000, but by only working 15 hours a week. Now, to me, that's scaling.
Definitely.
Right? And so it's just a different way to look at it. But let's talk about scalability. And I would love for you to just share a little bit of, you've been in that kind of that section of growth, which creates tension, which creates a stretching. Share a little bit about what you've been walking through, because I was super excited to wait a couple of extra weeks so that we could just chat for a few minutes about it.
Sure. So I will start by saying that my journey to scale has started about 2 years ago, when I really started thinking about my business in terms of growing it. And it was, do I want to grow? How do I want to grow? What is the sustainable way of growing? What is a profitable way of growing? How do I do it? Do I hire someone? Do I not? If I do, then what kind of position is it? And how have other people done it before me and in front of me? And how people doing it behind me? Like all of those questions. And a very important question kind of solidified in my mind was, what is my financial ceiling? And by that, I mean, how much revenue and therefore how much profit can I make while working normal hours, let's say 40 hours, not working nights and weekends, at least not to, just the amount that's not healthy, while at the same time being there for my family and my children, and not hiring any administrative office or other window treatment type help. So there were a lot of requirements in being able to answer that financial ceiling question. And so we can certainly go into the detail about how I went about all of that and who I talked to and what I ultimately discovered for myself.
Well, I think what we could do too is I will link the podcast where you talked about a lot of those details of seals.
Sure.
So I'll link that podcast so that people can kind of, because I think that was almost a year ago, they'll be able to kind of hear where you were.
Yeah.
And I do think this is interesting how you've defined scaling, right? And that's why I even brought up that one person was told they weren't scaling because they were only going up 100,000 or so, 200. But when you look at the fact that they were reducing their hours to part-time, that is scaling. I mean, that's it. So we really,
I do have to tell you that, and you won't hear that on Seal's podcast because I didn't quite get there. When we recorded that in February of 2018, I was very much in a thick of figuring it out.
Okay.
And what I ultimately decided, and when I decided, what became very clear to me is that I've always thought, Michelle, of scaling as growing.
Right.
However, growing in my mind meant that I would be away from my family. I would be working crazy hours. I would have to manage a lot of people, and people come with their problems, and that additional revenue, additional business would mean a lot of additional problems.
And stress.
So growing in my mind was synonymous with all the negative things, right?
Yes.
And so what I discovered for myself is that I didn't want to necessarily grow my my bottom line. Well, I mean, that doesn't sound quite right. It wasn't about growing the bottom line for me. It was about me, what I defined for myself, being peacefully present. It was about peacefully present for my kids, for my husband, for myself, for my friends, for my house, for anything that I wanted to do. It was about being peacefully there, being content, having the bandwidth to see those, all of those things, be part of them, embrace them, and really experience them. Because that's what was lacking for me before. I had the business, I had the incredible profitability, but I was so run down and I was so busy and so tired and exhausted that I really essentially didn't have that quality of life. So for me, scaling last year became not about growing, but about finding that quality of life and finding the bandwidth to take care of all the personal things while at the same time keeping up with the business. And ultimately, the answer was the same, whether I decided to grow or decided not to grow or decided to work less hours like your friend not your friend, your client is doing, or for me it was to have more bandwidth and have more quality of life. The whichever way we get to it, whichever path makes us more comfortable, the answer for me was, I think the answer is very much similar. And for me, it was to create systems and processes and to hire additional help. And systems and processes came first. And I spent and invested significant amount of time, energy, and money to create the systems that I wanted. And then I hired my first help. And then this year I hired my second help. And the good news that I would love to share with you, especially knowing when this episode will be airing in June of 2019, that by then I will have moved to a new space. I will have moved out of my house where I have my offices here and we're sort of busting out with all of us here. I will have combined those offices with my own workroom where we can be fully present and fully in control of everything that's made, fabricated, everything that all the lead times and turnaround times and every detail, where I will have space to see my interior design clients and have my fabric library and sample library available to them, and where I would love to hold the lunch and learns for those interior designers that want to learn more about the window treatments and recognize that profit center. I also decided to go through a whole rebranding exercise. So for the last couple of months, I am working on a different brand, same name, but different font type, different color, and a brand new website. It's a brand new Vitalia Inc. by end of June of 2019, and really all with the purpose of serving our interior designers to the best possible way that we can, where we can provide them with the best possible value, where they feel completely comfortable and confident that we are a one-stop shop for them.
So many things we could begin on that. I know.
Yeah, that's not even a helicopter view. That's more like a spaceship view of what has been happening.
Yeah, but it's good. It's good. And here's what I want to just say about all of that. Well, I could get started, but I'll try to be careful here and not take us on a 3-hour rant. But what I think is interesting is the way that we talked about kind of defining what sustainable means to you, defining what profitable means to you. We are now talking about this, defining what scalable means to you. And I had this discussion this week as well. Another client was told, you need to grow this way, and by somebody else. And she came to me and she's like, Michelle, that does not feel right to me. Like, it's going against my personal values. And and so when you talked about the idea that you had prior to where you are now, and I've had that thought before too. Oh my gosh, I don't want to have to go back to managing 10 people with this kind of stuff. I don't want all that again. I've been there. I've had that. I don't want it again. But that's not really what it doesn't have to be that way, right? And so what I said to her was, Go back and look at your top 3 values. What are your values? What is your why? Because even in our scaling, it should line up with our values and line up with our why. And so when you said that your overwhelming goal was, of course, not to reduce in any way the product or service, but to be peacefully present. And that means at work, at play, at home, with friends, wherever you are. And so what is this, let's say, what is the version of scalability, right? The framework, if you will, of scalability that will allow you to meet the needs and the demands of your clients, but to be peacefully present, not to meet the demands of your clients and be even more ragged and worn out and exhausted, because we could build a scalable program that went both ways.
Correct. Exactly. And that's what I was so afraid of last year when I was so worried and so emotional on Seal's podcast about it, because I knew that I could grow. I knew that I could put together a marketing machine and get more clients and more work and more revenue and more profit and all that. But at what cost? So I asked a question of myself, what is the incremental value to me of making more profit, but having less quality of life and not being there present for my family and myself? I was just not there, not fully there.
Right. I mentioned on one of the podcasts the other day, there's a Bible verse that's been coming to mind. I've been having kind of the same kind of conversation with quite a few people lately. And the Bible verse says, what does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul?
Yes.
And it's that whole, how much is enough? And I'm not here to tell anybody where that line is, right? That's not mine to tell. But I think for each of us in whatever season of life we're in, with whatever our family unit looks like, with the discussions we're having, the needs our family has, we have to decide that, because there is, make no mistake, there is always a trade-off, right? There is a trade-off.
I'll tell you more. I'll even tell you more. I think oftentimes the universe will decide that for us. And I will give you a very good example of what happened to me personally. Right after that podcast with Seal, and still running around like crazy and satisfying all of my customers and getting together all of those orders and measurements and installations and just going crazy, I was so exhausted, and it was I was getting so resentful, really, of everything that I had, everything that, which, on the surface, it was seemingly so good because the business was so high, but there were so many sacrifices and trade-offs on the inside that at one point, Michelle, I wrote in my journal that I don't want it anymore. I am tired of it all. God, please take it all away. And you know what God did? It put me on my back, literally. I pulled my back and I fell on the floor and I couldn't get up for a week. And you know me, I'm the one who is up at 5, down by 11, up at 5, running, getting things done no matter what. I will it to happen, and I couldn't. I just physically couldn't.
And I think that brings up just another great point, and that is, I had Colleen Losh on my show a couple of weeks ago, and hers is all about taking care of our body. We only have one body, and that to really take care of ourselves is mind, body, and spirit. And I've been in a similar situation, Vita, where I physically couldn't go, physically couldn't do anymore. I had expended everything that I had. Like, I had nothing else to give, right? And there was still more to be done, and I was just exhausted. And that is not the business that I want to help anybody create. It's the business I want to help us get out of. And so what I love about your sharing, first on Seal's podcast and this, and what I want our listeners to take away is, we may have this idea or desire to scale, but before we take on somebody else's definition of that, we need to define it for ourselves. We need to define the parts of work we love. We need to define our value system, our peacefully present, or whatever that might look like. And then what are the boundaries we want to put around that scalability to preserve our home and our life? I mean, I really am of the opinion we work so that we can live our life. We don't live just so that we can grind it out all day, every day. You know, we've got to have a priority there and really think about that and plan for that. And I don't want to build a business and plan a business that runs me ragged. Every single time I look at my calendar and I think, oh my gosh, look at that calendar. And I sit and think, well, who did it, Michelle? You did it. You did that to yourself. So stop, right?
Right, definitely.
And I have to put the brakes on, as my girlfriend says, pump the brakes, baby, pump the brakes. That's what I have to do to put some boundaries around it.
It truly is up to us. And that's ultimately why a lot of us went into the business, whether it was by default when your neighbor knocked on your door with a bolt of fabric, or whether it was a conscious effort like me quitting corporate, or anything in between like a lot of your listeners. But there's a big part of us staying in business, and that is because we can create our own schedule. We can have certain flexibility. However, as good, conscientious people, we often forget to do that. Mm-hmm. We forget that we are the number ones, not our clients, right? Not anybody else. We have to treat ourselves as number one. And certainly there are seasons in our business and there are seasons in life that are a lot more strenuous than others, where we may lose more sleep than in other seasons, or we may not go to the gym as often, or we may do what we don't normally do. But that season will pass. We will know that that is temporary. That is sort of the situation that I am right at this very moment with this new space. But I know that it is temporary and that I will breathe a lot better on the other end. But ultimately, if we can look back at the whole year and on balance, if we can say that, yes, I took care of myself by X, Y, and Z, whatever that means to each of the listener. Like to me, it may mean going to the gym. To me, it may mean not working crazy hours and be there for the family. It may also mean creating white space in my calendar. That's a new term that I learned in the last year or 2 years. Creating white space in your calendar. What the heck is that, Michelle? Like, how do you have white space in the calendar? Not all about it. But guess what? It is super healthy to do that. To just sit there with your thoughts, to sit there with a really good book that can ultimately propel you whichever way you want to be propelled, to just take that time to work on yourself, what be that business, personal, spiritual, mental, whichever it is, but to work on it and not in it. And so that takes a lot of conscious effort, and thankfully a lot of guts. You know, when the client calls and says, I have availability next Thursday at noon, can you come? And you look at your calendar and you have booked white space, what do? Do you have the guts to say, no, Mr. Smith, I don't have time. We have to do it next Thursday. Oh, but Michelle, I really need it. You know, I'm going on vacation and then we have this party and then I have a whole house worth of shades that I need done. Can you please come next Thursday? Do you have the balls to say, no, Mr. Smith, I don't. I will see you the following Thursday. That takes a lot of courage.
It takes a huge amount of courage. And I will say that there are times when I have that courage and I can tell sometimes I slip. I'm like, okay, fine, let me help you. My husband says I'm too tenderhearted. And, you know, and mine aren't window treatments. Mine are calling me going, you know, the auditor's coming or the tax collector's coming. I'm like, oh, could you just put them off for a week? I've got white space on my calendar. Not really, but you know what I'm saying. It is the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. And I know you do this because I think you mentioned it one time at a conference, and I do it as well. I literally have already blocked out all of the me time that I currently know about on my calendar, like through the rest of the year. If I know we're taking a vacation, if I know I have a doctor's appointment, if I know that Fridays are my business days, whatever it is, I already have it blocked on my calendar. The minute I recognize or know anything, it goes on my calendar as a block.
Yeah.
And I try my best to hold those as much as I possibly can, because I know it's important for my mental, spiritual, and emotional health. So,
It took me a long time to give myself permission to take mental days. And yes, definitely, haircuts, dentist appointments, vacations, conferences, all the kids stuff, activities, family activities, that's on the calendar. That's done. That's definitely there. But do I have the right to take a day off and go do whatever I want to do that gives me pleasure that day? Read a book, watch a stupid Netflix show, go shopping, get a massage, do nothing? Do I have permission to do that? Can I give that to myself? It took me a lot of years to arrive at the point where I can say, yes, I give myself permission to do that. I'm a stinking tough boss, Michelle.
I know. And you know what? We are, if you think about it, we are one of the most important employees, if not the most important employee in our own company. And we have to take care of ourselves. Sometimes I'll tell my husband, man, I'm working for a tough woman. She's something else. And then other times he'll say, what did you do today? And I'm like, oh, my boss is a saint. She sent me to get a massage. And then she sent me to the reflexologist. And then she told me to go get a coffee. And she was great today. So, but I do think that part of scaling is really being able to take care of ourselves, even in that process, so that we can be peacefully present. I may just have to steal that as that's my new thing, peacefully present.
Sure,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Wouldn't mind if we all stole that and said, we're all going to be like Vita and be present.
And it was interesting also, a big part of my journey that it still continues. I'm still on that journey, and I will be for the next 20 or however many years I do this, so it never ends. But the one realization that I came to for myself is that, again, I don't necessarily have to grow. I want to be able to have the quality of life. And if I can develop and build a business where I am almost expandable, then that will ultimately give me that value that I have been going after, that goal. So to me, the distinction is, you don't hire just to hire and delegate stuff. You have to go beyond the delegation and almost fire yourself for even you, even anybody, even we are not indispensable. And that was a really interesting distinction that I've realized for myself. And it was a very interesting book. Last year I read so many books just because I had to go back to the basics. And this was a book by Dan Kennedy on time management and productivity, and he talks a lot about that. And that was very, very interesting for me.
What was the name of the book?
The name of the book?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very long title. It's a No BS Time Management for Entrepreneurs, the ultimate no holds barred, kick butt, take no prisoners guide to time productivity and sanity, by Dan Kennedy.
Oh my gosh.
I know. If you type in Dan Kennedy productivity, it will come up.
Okay, great. So Vita, tell us, what is one of the next big profit goals in your business?
So I am moving. I am combining the two businesses. I am expanding to more interior designers than I ever have before. But at the same time, I don't ever want to forget where I came from and how it all started, and that the two strongest values that I provide to my clients is high quality product and high quality communication. Best quality product and best communication. And no matter how big I get or how small I decide to stay, what quality of personal life I can get out of this, how productive I'm gonna get, whether I fire myself ultimately from my business or I don't. Those are the two strongest value points that I want this business to have, well, whether I'm in it or beyond it.
I love that.
That will always be my goal. Yeah. And it's interesting. A lot of people start by having their goal as flexible schedule, and some people start by having their goal as making money. And I have both right now, but I have also a third one, and that is creating something that is sustainable beyond me.
That's an entirely different plan, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. It's where everything you touch needs to have a system. Everything you say, do needs to have a process where anybody can do it, and you no longer have to be present. It's such an amazing, well-oiled machine, and our clients get such an amazing service while I'm in it or not in it. And that is a huge goal. It's like a 20-year plan, really.
Yeah, it really is. So where can people find you, Vita?
They can always find me on my newly redesigned website, which is vitaliainc.com.
Perfect. And I will have that in the show notes, along with a link to Sales Podcast and a link to the book by Dan Kennedy. I think all of those will be great. And
there's another book that I can recommend for anybody who is interested in scaling. There's a great book called Scaling Up by Vern Harnish.
Love it.
Yeah. It's almost like if you wanted to get an MBA in 2 weeks, you can read that book and probably be smarter than a lot of other MBAs out there.
Mm-hmm. I love his books.
Yeah, they're really great. But you know what? I have to tell you, the one thing that was lacking for me that I so desperately wanted is that quality of life. And that's not what it talks about. At least it didn't talk to me in the way that I wanted to. It will give you every business concept you possibly need to know and worry about as you scale your business, whichever way you decide to do it, up, down, sideways. But I wanted more than that. I wanted to be a good mom, and I wanted to be a good wife, and I wanted to be of true value to my clients. And I had to find it elsewhere. And that was quite a long, personal, sometimes tumultuous journey to get there.
I appreciate that you bring up that part of it, because everybody has their own journey, right? And part of my discovery process and my journey has been very similar through my 20-something years. Is my goal was to be mom and wife first, simply because, like, I'm in a stage right now, my children are grown. They're 21, 24. One's at college, one's graduated, they're done. So if I had, for those first 16 years, 17 years, when everybody was at home, if I had not paid them any attention, or if I had not focused on them the way that I wanted to, I think I would have had a heck of a lot of regrets, and I would have had some resentment towards my business that I created, right? I'm not blaming anybody but myself if I did that. It would have been.
And that's the thing that goes back to what was said on several occasions during this podcast. We are the owners of our business, and we are the creators of our fate. So the buck stops with us, whether it being the service that we provide to our clients or the service that we provide to ourselves, right? And being healthy and being present, being peacefully present, is certainly our responsibility, nobody else's.
So I am looking now to scale. My next scaling opportunity is to build in a way that I want to say in somewhere between 5 and 7 years, I might very well have a grandbaby.
Oh my goodness.
Well, they're not married. Yeah, they're only like 21 and 24. So
I'm looking ahead, and that's very smart.
But I am thinking ahead, because it takes time to plan to get where I want to go. Just like you. You're talking about 2 years that you've been working through some of this. And I am now working to try to, what can I build? How can I build it in such a way? Because I don't have grandchildren, but every single person I've ever met, their eyes light up, their heart pumps out of their chest, and they're just like going crazy about their grandchildren. And I want to create space. If I had one right now, it would be difficult for me to see my grandchild. It would be difficult for me right now if I had a parent who needed me heavily. And so I know that's coming in my life, and I'm trying to build a business. So at the beginning of my career, I needed time for my young children to raise them. Now I'm looking to build time in my later part of my career to be able to take care of my parents, my in-laws, and grandchildren. And so, that's important to me. And I just don't want anybody to feel like if you don't scale your business to X millions of dollars, you're not a real business. Just throw that junk out the window. I think each person needs to scale to the point that, as Vita says, we can be peacefully present. So look at the seasons of your life. Look at what you're wanting to build, what you want to do with it. What is your end game? Do you want to sell it? Do you want it to live past you? Do you want to turn off the lights and walk out the door? Like, make up your own plan for what you want to do here, and then just execute the best way you possibly can to get there.
And, to that end also, I want to say that it's really important to operate at our highest good at the moment.
Correct.
Something I learned a while ago from Allie Brown. It's not about what somebody else is doing. It's not about what we should be doing, what we could have done, should have, all of that stuff. It's not about, okay, if I take this step right now, how will it look 10 steps from now? And how will it look a year from now or 2 years from now? And then we start getting to that, like you were saying at the very beginning, analysis paralysis. It is just taking one step at a time. To not overthink the plan, the strategy, or that vision. Do what feels right now. Do what feels right today, because it is a step in the right direction. And once the step is taken and the results are more or less clear, then the next step will present itself. And then the next step will present itself after that. So it's one step at a time, one step at a time. Even if sometimes we feel like that next step will take us off of a cliff. And believe me, sometimes I feel like moving out of my house, starting a workroom, combining the two, renting a space, doing lunch and learns, creating the studio and all that. I feel like sometimes I'm jumping off a cliff. But I know, deep down, I know, and I choose, Michelle, I choose to have faith that the universe will pick me up, and it will serve as a blanket somewhere down the line, down that cliff. It will kind of pick me up and catch me and bring me to where I need to be, to where I'm meant to be.
Well, I totally believe that you're going to rock this. Like, I don't even have a doubt. I know you think you're jumping off a cliff, but like, I just am like, yeah, she's just like moving into the next phase for her. And I totally see it. I think it's interesting. I get it. There are plenty of times where I feel like I'm jumping off a cliff and everybody's like, yeah, of course you were going to do that. I don't even know what took you so long. And
that's what my husband says to me. I'm like, well, you made that decision 2 months ago. No, I didn't.
Right. And so, it is, again, it's that outside perspective of somebody going, of course you can. Of course I see that. Sure you can. I believe in you. And I think that's what we're also called to do with other people around us. And so I just want to encourage our listeners, if you see somebody around you who is trying and they're working hard, encourage each other. Let's just be such an encouragement to each other, which again allows us to be peacefully present instead of unpeacefully present. Vita, thank you for being
at all, right?
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I know that it's not going to be long. You're going to come back and we're going to be talking about like what your next way to conquer the next thing is going to be, because it's going to be a fun discovery session.
Oh, we're going to have the where is she now kind of session.
Exactly. Well, and if Pet Rocks come back in style, I'll call you. That or, the little bracelets.
Right. Whatever it is, we're going to make it successful because there's no other choice.
That's exactly right.
There's just no other choice but to make it a success. The alternative doesn't exist.
Well, you have a great day. And I thank you so much for sharing your journey, your expertise, and your wisdom.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me.
Thanks, Vita, for sharing today. And I can tell you, I went immediately and made sure there was white space on my calendar going forward because we all need it. I can also tell you that I've got that phrase that you shared, peacefully present, going through my brain over and over and asking myself what that means for me. That was a really great reminder that we're building the business that we want, not one that checks off the boxes for someone else. And as you build your own business, check out my course, The Solid Foundation Builder, at scarletthreadconsulting.com. Determine your why, your strengths, your mission, your vision, and then set a course to make your company profitable, because profit doesn't happen by accident.